It must be one of the most amazing flying stories of all time. It is still hard to believe an airliner full of passengers is out of control at 17,000 feet and the pilot is stuck outside the plane. In the cockpit, 3 frightened flight attendants are clinging to his legs. If he slips from their grasp, the captain's body could be sucked into the engine and brought down the plane. At the controls, a young co-pilot is battling to get the plane to the nearest airport. The lives of 87 passengers and crew hang by a thread. 8:20 a.m., 10th of June 1990 began like any other day for the crew of the British Airways Flight 5390. In command of the flight were 41-year-old Tim Lancaster, an extremely experienced pilot for 21 years on this type of aircraft, and First Officer Lister Atchison, an experienced co-pilot. He'd just driven down from Manchester that morning. Before takeoff, the co-pilot performs a walk-around checking the outside of the aircraft for anything wrong. In the cockpit, Captain Tim Lancaster reviews a log of the maintenance carried out on the plane the day before. Flight 5390 made a routine departure from the British Regional Airport at Birmingham en route to the sunny Spanish resort of Malaga. One of its most popular destinations in the UK at this time was Spain, due to the number of holiday hotels and resorts that were situated on Spain's beautiful Mediterranean coastline and its Balearic Islands. The BAC 111 was known as the Jeep of the Skies, a workhorse that was easy to maintain and had a good safety record. At 43 tons, this pressurized hull is carrying 81 passengers and 6 crew and is now climbing to 23,000 feet. In just over 2 hours, they should be in Spain. 2 minutes into the climb, the pilots switch on the autopilot. Tim Lancaster takes off his shoulder straps and relaxes into the flight. Now almost 13 minutes after takeoff and at 17,300 feet, they're just 5,000 feet from their assigned altitude. But then, in a split second, everything changes with a huge explosion. The captain's windscreen blows out into the sky. Almost immediately, a white fog forms. The co-pilot is suddenly fighting for control in a 350-mile-an-hour wind. There's no time to think about the captain, who's been blasted out of the window by pressurized air escaping from the aircraft. The rushing wind pins Captain Lancaster to the roof of the cockpit. Inside, his legs have jammed the control column forward, disconnecting the autopilot and pushing the plane down into a dive. Lister Atchison needs all his flying experience, now he's on his own. The captain's body is pinned to the outside of the jet as it hurtles down from 17,000 feet. The throttles are jammed forward, increasing the speed to nearly 400 miles an hour. Co-pilot Atchison has to take command while he fights to bring the plane under control. Steward Nigel Ogden can see his captain being sucked out of the aircraft. Nigel Ogden holds onto the captain for dear life outside 390 miles an hour blast of wind at minus 17 degrees centigrade smashes into Tim Lancaster's body. The tornado in the cockpit is giving Atchison major problems. Air traffic control can hear his cries for help, but the storm rushing through the cockpit drowns out their replies. The captain's feet are still pushing against the control column, and Alistair is struggling to get full control of the plane. He's now diving through some of the busiest air lanes in the world. With the added danger of a mid-air collision, from the cabin, lead steward John Heward sees the chaos in the cockpit and does what he can to help. Alistair, who's never flown with this crew before, has to leave them to their own devices and focus on getting the plane to safety. He now has control of the throttles. John and Nigel have wrenched the captain's feet away from the control column, but instead of slowing down, Atchison decides to continue the rapid descent. It will quickly take him out of the way of any other air traffic and take him to a lower altitude where oxygen equipment won't be needed. Staying too long at a high altitude risks oxygen starvation, and this older aircraft is not fully equipped with oxygen for all the passengers on board. In the cabin, 2 other stewards, Susan Prince and Simon Rogers, are trying to prepare the passengers for what they hope will, at worst, be an emergency landing. They've dived 11,000 feet in just 2.5 minutes, but as they level out and slow down to 170 miles per hour, the captain's body is no longer pinned to the roof and slides round to the side of the plane. Working his way from the back of the cabin, Steward Simon Rogers now catches sight of the chaos in the cockpit for the first time. Simon and Alistair now face one of their most difficult decisions: what to do with the lifeless body of the captain. No words are said, but for a moment, the thought passes between them, but the best thing would simply be to let it go. But Alistair's ordered to hold on to the body. Releasing the body at the position it was in would have gone close to the upper area of the wing, and it could have damaged the leading edge of the wing, or it could very well have gone into the engine. Quite a lot of damage could have been caused by the release of the body. Alistair has managed to get down to 11,000 feet. Without the captain to help, he's operating the plane systems from memory and shepherding it around Heathrow, some of the most congested airspaces in the world. 7 minutes out of contact with the ground, he's able to hear the voice of air traffic control for the first time. Alistair wants to land at Gatwick Airport, as he's flown there many times before. But Southampton is nearer, and even though he's never flown there before, he knows he has to get down fast. All the maps and charts blew out of the window with the captain. Only the air traffic controller can guide Alistair's turns towards Southampton. Alistair is concerned that the plane is above its maximum landing weight, being full of fuel for the journey to Malaga, and the BAC 111 can't dump fuel. If the runway isn't long enough, he faces more problems. 32 minutes after takeoff, with 81 terrified passengers, a nearly full fuel tank, and the captain blasted out of the window, Alistair attempts the most difficult landing of his career. At 8:55 a.m., flight BA 5390 makes a perfect landing at Southampton Airport. Immediately, emergency vehicles surround the plane. Firefighters remove the body of the captain and lead the passengers and crew away. Alistair has carried out a remarkable piece of flying almost unprecedented in aviation history. He had to pilot his plane without his captain, who has undergone physical stresses that nobody could have been expected to survive. Tim Lancaster's body was subjected to a two-pronged assault: the physical violence that his body suffered being blown out of the plane, and the extreme cold and lack of oxygen at 17,000 feet. Every 1,000 feet of altitude causes the temperature to drop by 2 degrees centigrade, so the temperature on the outside of the plane would have been around minus 17 degrees centigrade. The extreme wind chill also meant his body was losing heat very rapidly. Despite the trauma that Captain Lancaster's body suffered, there was one final twist to his story. The captain of that fateful flight, Tim Lancaster, somehow survived his horrific ordeal. There were no fatalities on BA 5390. As his frozen, lifeless body was removed from the plane, nobody thought that Tim could have survived such punishment, but remarkably, he was slowly beginning to emerge from his horrific adventure. Tim Lancaster's survival was a little short of miraculous. He'd been minutes away from death. It was Alistair Acheson's flying that saved his life, and his quick thinking in getting the plane to the ground in only 22 minutes saved Lancaster from dying from the effects of exposure, and, by pure chance, the physical trauma he suffered was limited. Flying alone, battling nearly 400-mile-an-hour winds, and defeating the possibility of oxygen deprivation, Alistair Acheson's achievement in saving Flight 5390 was outstanding. Even as the crisis was unfolding, accident investigators were rushing to Southampton to find an explanation. On the ground at Southampton Airport, the search for clues begins. Initial investigation shows no distortion to the frame of the windscreen, so this rules out a problem with the structure. The fact that there are no shards of glass also discounts a bird strike. So, what was the cause of this freak accident? An in-depth investigation concluded that the windscreen panel that had blown out had been replaced in a hurry. A day before the flight departed, as part of regularly scheduled maintenance, the bolts used to secure the windshield to the aircraft's upper nose were found to have all been of slightly incorrect size and thus vulnerable to dislodgement. The event highlighted that British Airways maintenance policies lack the proper quality control checks after any repairs or replacement of parts were carried out. First Officer Acheson and crew members Susan Prince and Nigel Ogden were all awarded the Queen's Accommodation for valuable service in the air. That wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to comment on what you think of the video and tell us what you would like to see next, and give it a thumbs up for the video. If you are not subscribed, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay notified about our uploads. I'll see you next time.